Welcome back. There are so many issues raised by the blaze in the Johannesburg CBD yesterday. What are the legal rights of the owner of a building, in this case, the city of Johannesburg, when a building is hijacked? What does the law say about the process? And what do we do about the underlying social ill, which is the housing crisis, with many South Africans desperate at the moment to find a place where they can lay their head? To discuss, we're joined by the South African Human Rights Commission's Commissioner, Jonas Sibanyoni, and legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala. Thank you both, gentlemen, for being with me today. Let me start with you, Mpumelelo. What is the legal process? So a building is hijacked. You can't just kick people out. There are some laws around this, as we have been repeatedly told. What are they?
The first one is the Prevention of Illegal Eviction and Unlawful Occupation Act, which basically says if you want to evict someone of a particular building, there are certain things that you must do, but most importantly, it must be through a court order. So an application would be made. First attempt would be to say, we are going to court to send you notices. We have identified who stays within those buildings. Because we are government, there may be alternative accommodation that you would have found for you. Then in the second tranche, when you go to court, then an invitation for those individuals to then come in and plead their case would have been made. Then they would come in, and then the order would be made to evict those particular processes. Now, in these particular instances, this is just one law that can be used, especially in the city of Johannesburg. There is a problems building bylaw, which is there, by the way, which in one of the avenues which are there is to create an administrator, take over that particular building and be able to take care or take good care of it with the administration in hand, of course, after going to court and getting that order. The problem in this case is, why wasn't that bylaw specifically attended to? Why were the officials found wanting in terms of the profiling of the bad buildings, and what are they doing about them? This could have been prevented, by the way, had it been that the city bylaw that has been created by them was followed by the city.
Yeah, and this was a building owned by the city. Just backtrack a little bit. I think it's a mind flip for some people to understand that you need a court order, even if hijackers have taken your building. But would it have been pretty simple for the city of Johannesburg to get a court order here?
Not really simple, but it's something which is doable. So it's not something in which you'd go to court today and get it by the end of the day. However, within the process of a year at most, you would have been able to get that particular order, and you would be able to implement it. When you go to court, it's based on two reliefs that you would be seeking. The first one is to say, I want to take over the administration of this building as per the bylaw that I have created, which is a problem. The problems building bylaw. And secondly, I want an order that will enable me to evict anyone who was under that particular building, was occupying the building in the first place. Now, if you are able to do that and you take through that particular process, then you'll be able to win. There is a proviso, though. Some of the problems that come in is that the people that stay within these buildings, they change from time to time. So the person that you serve the court papers to and the person who's now occupying the building would have changed. But there is a means of trying to curtail it. All that it means is that it needs a very active municipality to make sure that they're able to follow up these particular procedures and use the legal avenues which are available to them, including, by the way, law enforcement agencies, which can include or must include the municipal police that can be able to stay guard, or any other security service provider which would have to go into the building and make sure that they're able to safeguard it, to make sure that one enters the building.
All right, let me bring you in, Mr. Sibanyoni. The minister we were speaking to earlier, Minister Zulu, saying you can't just kick people out unless there is alternative accommodation available. And of course, that brings us to the big issue. Sometimes there is just not. And we've seen evictions and then people stand up and say it's illegal. You can't just kick people out. You're saying that that has to be addressed.
It should be addressed spot on. Why I am saying that is because when people end up being residents in these hijacked buildings, it talks to the question of the scarcity of land. You remember that in view of the colonization and the apartheid laws, most of the people were placed in the outskirts of our country in the deep rural areas. And then you find that people centers, the city centers, where there are job opportunities and the like. And it is, for example, the duty of the state to ensure that these right that the people have the right to adequate houses realized. Of course, the Constitution says the state has to do that through legislation and resources within its reasonable resources, that those rights are realized.
Can you assess what the Minister told us earlier tonight? Because obviously the Human Rights Commission has been looking at land and housing over all the years. Is it fair enough to say that it's been very difficult for government in nearly 30 years to deal with the problems created by apartheid, or should we be on top of this by now?
I will answer that in two fashions. First of all, you will realize that apartheid was in South Africa for 300 years. And then this democratic government is barely new in terms that it is below 30 or just around 30 years in power. And then when you look at the land audit, you find that 72% of the land is still in the hands of those who dispossessed, followed by 14% owned by the colored people, and then 5% by the Indian people, and 4%, only 4% owned by the Africans or the black people. Now, to address such a magnitude issue, it needs to say that there should be land made available. But it will be amiss if I don't say that there is also state land. Land is in the hands of the national government. State is in the hands of the provincial government, and some other pieces of land is in the hands. When I'm saying it's in the hands, it's under the administration of local municipalities. Now it is upon the organs of the states. In other words, it is upon the government maybe to start allocating those land, make it available for people to settle, so that you don't find people resorting to the hijacked buildings, as we have seen in this tragedy that has occurred.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation of the desperation that people must feel. Mpumelelo, how often are legal processes held up because there is simply nowhere provided for the people to go? So we often say illegal eviction, because you can't just have the red ants, which often used to be in the news, coming and kicking people out.
It's quite often. Even the process of doing the PI application, which I was talking about earlier, is not something that can be done within a few months. There's two basically dates that you have to comply with. The first date is simply to say these are the individuals that I've identified, and this is the notice which I'm going to serve upon them. And within those papers, especially if you are government evicting those individuals, you then have to say this is the alternative accommodation that I'll be able to provide them. Before you even move on to the second date, and they're given an opportunity to defend themselves. And there are NGOs that provide those particular defenses. And the one thing that they would come into, they would say provide alternative accommodation when it comes to this. However, this must be stated, which is maybe within the outside of the legal realms, but it comes to the proper planning when it comes to the municipalities. And mostly when we speak about the risk identification and the mitigation of that risk. Municipalities engage on IDP processes every single year or on a regular basis. So the identification of saying that how many people do we have within this municipality is something which the municipality should have on hand. The ward profiling of each of the municipality or each of the wards that are there is something that should be done on a regular basis. Now, if the question is going to be, we are short of land, then what you can do is apply and say to the Department of Public Works, this is the amount of land that you are looking for, and even expropriate it if it means be. I think government is the one organ of state that has the power to say, we've identified a piece of land that belongs to Mpumelelo Zikalala. Because we're not using it, we're going to expropriate it and build houses. So if it's going to take maybe 36 months in order for you to do that, engage in that process. But the problem that you find here is that we have all these beautiful instruments that we have. For example, our constitution is there, prevention of illegal evictions, which is there. When it comes to the problems building bylaws, which is there, and any other bylaws which are not being utilized to the T, but most importantly, the collection of the very important information to enable you to act then is a problem, which is why you find problems such as this one. So it did not start yesterday to be a bad building. It started a while ago. And why didn't you stop it back then? Because you knew that the consequences of not intervening earlier are going to be what you experienced yesterday.
And of course, it becomes more complicated to deal with the issue over time, as you've both explained. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala and Commissioner from the Human Rights Commission, Jonas Sibanyoni.